Hey everybody, my name is Sarah Pollock, and I am really thrilled to be here with the Rittenhouse Square Fine Art Show 5 o'clock club. I'm just going to wait until we get to the top of the hour and wait for some folks to join us, and we'll get started. But I want to welcome you to my Knoxville, Tennessee studio. I'm an oil painter. I work representationally, so I specialize in landscapes and cityscapes, and I will show you more today about my process and recent works. So we'll just wait a little bit longer until we get to the top of the hour and we'll get started with the studio tour, and I'll be happy to answer any questions too. Just going to wait until we get some more people who come online and join us. But thank you for being here today, and I look forward to answering any of your questions here in the next hour ahead. So thanks so much, and we'll just give it a few more minutes until we get some more people to join us. But it's a beautiful day here in East Tennessee. My studio is based in Knoxville. We used to live up in Pennsylvania, in central Pennsylvania near State College, Penn State University. Called that home for about 14 years. And about 2.5 years ago, my husband had a career opportunity, and so we moved down here to Knoxville. And it's been quite a big change, but it's been good. I've gotten some new inspiration for my artwork, certainly a whole different environment down here with the light. So we'll see some of the new works I've been working on, some things from the Great Smoky Mountains. We're less than an hour away from there, so I'm excited to share that with you today. And just give it a few more minutes until we get to the top of the hour, and we'll get rolling officially. But if you have any questions, please, by all means, put things into the comments, and I'll be happy to answer things as I go along and things come up. I also want to invite you, as we're looking at pieces today and I'm sharing more stuff with you, please feel free to visit my website. I take a lot of pride in trying to keep it up to date and current. The website is sarahpollock.com, so it's Sarah with an H, and Pollock, Pollock.com. So there you can go and see the recent works, especially some of the things I'll showcase today. And of course, you can always reach out to me and ask any follow-up questions. And want to encourage you as well to be sure to put any questions in the comments today, because that helps me kind of understand what's getting across and what's not. So anyways, without too much further ado, I guess I'll get started. I think we're close enough to the top of the hour. Just again to reintroduce myself, I am Sarah Pollock. I'm an oil painter based in Knoxville, Tennessee. This southern city has been our home for about the past 2.5 years, and so I'm still kind of getting acclimated to the summers. After spending 14 years up in Pennsylvania, the summers here are probably like the biggest challenge, but the good news is it gives me more opportunity to work outside. It's pretty temperate year-round. So one of the first things I'm going to share with you today is just kind of how I get ideas, what I specialize in. The theme of today's talk is celebrating beauty in the everyday. And in my opinion, this year, that has never been more important. We've certainly had kind of a tough, challenging year. So I think it's been really good to kind of like showcase the beauty that we do still have in our world. So what I want to do is just get started, and I'll take you over. First part of my process has to do with working outside. So I'm going to share with you, I actually set up here in my studio my outdoor painting easel. This is a real small kind of mini palette, if you will, and what you're seeing right now is a piece that I started on plein air, out in location in the field in the Great Smoky Mountains. I'm very captivated by water and rocks, which, I don't know, sounds a little bit crazy, but I like all the different colors and the movement within water, as well as all the different faces of rocks. And what you're seeing here is just a small portable field easel, not really any bigger than like a small carry-on suitcase really that I take out in the field to an outdoor office. And you can actually see some of the colors here, some of the oil colors mixed up that went onto the piece, and then as they translate up into the work. I do a lot of work out in the field in the outdoor office because it's a great way to learn color and light. And so there's no better way to do that than just through direct observation. So one of the things that you'll notice too is I actually, in doing the full setup here, even did the umbrella. If you've ever looked at photos of plein air painters and wondered, why is there an umbrella up? It's actually just to shield against the glare while working with wet paint out in the field. A lot of times when you're working outside with the bright sunlight overhead, it's just helpful to have that as a little bit of shadow. So this is my plein air painting kit. I take this out in the field, just like a miniaturized version of what I do in my studio. And it's just a really valuable learning tool for me. Not everything turns out. Sometimes the light moves too fast and I can't always keep up with it, but I tend to work small. So this piece that's on the easel right now is just 8 inches by 12 inches, but that allows me to get the detail and to get what I want in a small amount of time, because otherwise the light and the shadow move like within a matter of hours, and it can be difficult to keep pace with that. So what I want to do is go from there and just show you sometimes things don't always turn out. This is a blank small panel, very typical of what I would use out in the field. And these are some pieces that I've started out in the field. Like we have spectacular fall colors down here in East Tennessee. And I've got like a whole stack of things. Sometimes things turn out, sometimes things don't. I've got a bunch of stuff here that even though they don't maybe necessarily turn into quote unquote keepers, they can still be really instructive. And so I just like to have all that access so I can take things into the studio, maybe do something a little bit bigger on my easel to perfect it. So that's one area where ideas come from. Again, the theme of today's talk is celebrating beauty in the everyday. So using the outdoor office, taking the plein air field easel out, and doing work right in beautiful Eastern Tennessee. Another source of ideas is actually just a very traditional sketchbook. So I do a lot of work just with good old pencil and paper, sometimes pen and ink. This actually, I'll show you, this is a recent cityscape based on a subject here in Knoxville, Tennessee. And we will later today see what that final painting ended up being, but this is a street scene with a Shell gas station. And another sketch that I have here, this is a piece I did from Louisville, just about 5 hours up the road from us here in Tennessee. So ideas come from both the field work, like with the portable field easels I'm showing behind you, as well as from sketches and ideas and photos, like just kind of a photo diary based upon my travels. Just to kind of show you the translation, this little sketch from Louisville, Kentucky, eventually grew up into this painting here. And this is called Louisville Soaker. And this is an original oil painting on canvas. And I just really enjoy the reflections of just kind of the abstract play of color and light in city streets. So something as basic as a sketch like this can help me kind of perfect and refine an idea for a bigger piece that I want to do in my studio. So for something like this, like I get a lot of questions sometimes, like, do you work from photos? And I do, because a lot of times I'm trying to catch just a very particular moment, like where the lights or things are aligned in a given subject. So yeah, I do, but I try to bring something of myself to every piece. And a lot of that traces back actually to where we started, which is, the plein air work out in the field. Believe it or not, doing subjects like this, like up in the Great Smokies or in some of Tennessee's beautiful state parks, doing things like this helps me kind of practice and get a feel for what I want to do when I come back in my studio. And again, as we go along today, please, by any means, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put things in, and I'll try to respond to things as I go along. So, we have a couple of sources of ideas. One comes from plein air work, the other one comes from sketching, and then more typically, when I'm in my studio working during the day, I do work from photo reference. It is all things that I've seen and witnessed. And so here is a photo from Asheville, North Carolina, just about an hour and a half away from where we are in Knoxville, Tennessee. And part of what I was showing you earlier is like, I do a lot of small field things out on plein air, and they're not all keepers. You can see here, this didn't really quite make it to the finish line. I just started out and kind of lost my mojo with the green trees and the rocks and the water. This was a subject that I was working on up in Pennsylvania. But again, it's not a loss. What I actually did was, I took this idea, this is again a photo from Asheville, North Carolina, and I took a piece from out in the field that didn't really quite turn out, so I just went ahead and turned the whole panel upside down and started over with the beginning of this new painting. So basically, this painting that I'm going to show to you today is just kind of a redo, like a giant makeover of a piece that I started out in the field, and it didn't quite turn out. But the cool thing is, I have all the underlying color to play with and to layer over when I start the new piece. So sometimes I'm feeling kind of bold, I'll just do that because the worst enemy is a blank white panel. So let's take a look at this piece in process. This is a little bit better than halfway done. This is up on my studio easel right now here in Knoxville, Tennessee. This piece is just a 1 foot square piece, and it's all about the placement of this figure and her interaction with the scene. And let's take a look at the palette. So I used to work as a color stylist for Walt Disney feature animation, and I'm very interested in color. So basically my palette is a bunch of colors, like basically the rainbow kind of unwrapped around. So I have all the basic primaries, your yellows, reds, and blues, and that becomes the basis for the work that I create. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of pivot around here and show you a little bit of how I work. This piece is, again, it's a little bit more than halfway through completion. It's a little dark right now, so some of these areas, the windows and whatnot, a little darker than I would like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just pick up my brush and start working in some highlights into this shop window. And as long as I'm thinking about it, I'll discuss with you the brushes that I typically use. These are just called long flats, if you will. They're just kind of basic squared off brushes. I have fancier ones, if you will, that I use in my studio, but oddly enough, I really kind of focus on these flat, straight brushes. So I've got some fun tools here, like some silicone tools that I can use, like when I want to spread paint on and just kind of use like a spatula. Of course, I've got the traditional palette knife, but typically what I use most often are these flats. And it's worked pretty well for me. Sometimes I'll use other brushes to flatten things out and blend stuff too. And again, I see you've got some good eyeballs here today, so if you have any questions as I start to work here, by all means, please put things into the comments and I'll be happy to respond. But I'm going to go ahead and just grab this brush here and start to kind of break up some of the darker colors here. I like the contrast between the figure. Thank you for the brush envy comment, I like that. I actually just got a new shipment of brushes in. I get a lot of my brushes from Rosemary and Company over in England, and so I got a new shipment of brushes in today that I was opening and enjoying today with our studio mascot, our dog. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you, I've got some lighter colors here on the palette, some warmer colors. I'm going to pick up some yellow and just mix this in here. And what I'm doing is just trying to create like a warm, lighter color that I can use to kind of emulate like the incandescent lights, if you will, that are going to be in the window. So again, I'm picking up some of the yellow, just a very basic cadmium yellow, so nice, bright, kind of warm yellow. Just going to neutralize it a little bit because if I were to use it straight, it'd be probably a little too astringent. So just going to mix it in with some white and some pinks and get that on the brush here. And I try to force myself to use as big a brush as possible. When I first began painting, my tendency was to kind of work with itsy bitsy brushes. And I can show you an example. This would be kind of an itsy bitsy brush. And so I've tried to get away from using things like that and just try to let go and get a little bit more nimble with bigger brushes. If any of you are watching and you're interested in doing oil painting or even watercolor painting too, the best piece of advice I can give you is pick up the biggest brush that you can tolerate and try to go as far along with it as you can. Bigger brushes, I think, do definitely yield better results. And certainly they can come much, much bigger than this, but this is a fairly typical size that I'll work with. So I've got some of the warm color mixed up, and I'm going to go ahead and show you here, try to get this lined up a little bit better so you can see. There we go. So what I want to do is just break up some of the darkness that's in this scene. And I'm just going to go ahead and apply that in here. And the fun thing about oil painting is that it allows for really effective blending. So I can pick up maybe not quite such a bright yellow color on my palette. So here it is a little bit more subdued, like a little bit more orange, if you will, and just soften some of this to neutralize it. But this kind of helps break up that big window shape over the figure. And again, this is a subject from Asheville, North Carolina. This was actually a shoe store in Asheville, North Carolina. A beautiful, bright, sunny day. I love the play of the awning, and then her figure as it cuts into this kind of dark window. So I liked all these elements, and again, you know, it is from photo reference, it is from a scene that I saw and witnessed myself, but the cool thing is that if you just keep an open mind, really interesting subjects are out there available for the taking. You just have to kind of keep an open mind and open eyes. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in some bigger shapes here. And again, you can see the size of the brush. It's fairly large. I mean, really, like, it's actually bigger than her head, but that's okay. We want to work with something a little bit bigger so that things don't get too picked at, if you will. And I'm just going to pick up some of the same colors that we see in the surrounding bricks and just use that to warm up the darks that are in this window and kind of play with breaking up this darker shape. And again, if anybody has any questions, please, by all means, feel free to pop in a comment and I'll be happy to answer as I work along. But what I want to do is just add a little bit more life into this window here. Maybe move just at an angle and just kind of frame her. I'm going to leave this area around her principally fairly dark so that we can still pick out her form with her white shirt and her lighter colored jeans. But I'm going to keep the window a bit warmer, just so that it doesn't kind of become too much of an abyss, if you will. And then I will pick up a slightly different brush to pick up a different color. So a little bit smaller brush here, but I'm going to go ahead and use that on the easel here. And just grab a little bit more of a cooler blue. I'm not sure if you can see that, but I think you can. So I'll pick up some blue just to put in some contrast with the warmer colors that I've got going on. And bring it back up. Sorry about the hand there. There we go. So question. It looks like your brushes hold their shape well. Did you say your favorite brush brand? Yeah, so my favorite brush brand, well, I've got a few, actually. So I just got an order in today from a place called Rosemary and Company, and they're based over in England. And then another brush company that I really like, and I'll just grab, let's see here. Here we go. This is, I don't know, I'm going to put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, but Treckle or Treckel. These guys, I think, are based out on the West Coast. I believe they're in California. And this is actually a hog bristle brush, and this is a synthetic bristle brush, and they actually give different results. But to continue along with the demonstration here, this is a synthetic bristle brush, and I'm just going to grab, I picked up some blues, and I'm just going to again go back into this window around this figure and just break up some of the darker colors around her, just to add some interest. And it kind of implies, you know, like the activity, if you will, out on the street around her. So I'll just use this to get some color. And, you know, I'm being very deliberate about choosing this color. Right now I've got some blue on the paintbrush, and that's on purpose because a lot of this scene is framed with warmer reds. And also, I just want to show you briefly, for those of you who've been watching, as I started out, I explained that this particular piece actually began as a whole different work that I had done out in plein air, but I wasn't happy with the way it turned out. It was, you know, kind of a start like this, where it had a lot of greens and blues and rocks and stuff like that. I wasn't pleased with how it came out, so I just turned it upside down and started painting this subject over it. Now, why would I do that? I mean, apart from conserving the panel, it also creates some really interesting color and texture effects. So if you look real carefully down here in the details, you'll see this area of texture in the foreground pavement. There's some orange and there's some green that shine through in here, and that was the original painting that I went over top of. So I'm kind of selectively allowing some of that to shine through, and it gives me some texture throughout the piece as well. You can kind of see some texture and some play here. Another really interesting passage again, trying to add interest to something that could be just vanilla, if you will, like with that foreground pavement and concrete. So by going over the top of something, I can let some of that underlying color shine through and create kind of an interesting textural effect. So again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to let me know, but I'm going to keep moving along here with the demo. So again, I've got some blue on the paintbrush, very deliberate, just kind of trying to create a contrast with the warmer colors that surround in this scene. And you'll notice, like, even from just the time where we began, I've begun to break up this bigger shape in the window. I'm going to come in here and just add a little bit more definition to kind of imply some shop lights inside the store. In oil painting, you typically work from your darker colors forward to your highlights. So the highlights kind of become almost like the final frosting on the cake. So here again, I've got like this kind of incandescent gold and yellow, if you will, and I'm just going to pick that up and go ahead and work that into the scene. A little bit stronger here. And this piece, by the way, will ultimately become part of a series that I've been working on. I've been working on a series of works called 21st Dates. And 21st Dates is like a whole series of paintings that I'm doing right now, landscapes and cityscapes, that kind of celebrate the anniversary of my first date with my husband. My husband's been my underpaid artist assistant for the past 20 years. He and I met 20 years ago, and I just decided to go ahead and do a whole series this year to celebrate that anniversary. And so I've been releasing a couple of new paintings each week, and this one will eventually become part of the new 21st Dates paintings. Question, how do you avoid muddying it up when working wet paint into wet paint? Sometimes I can avoid it, sometimes I don't. Let's take a look here. The nice thing about working with the paint already wet on the surface and then adding more into it is that you do get really good soft edges. But the hazard, of course, is that you can risk muddying things up. I try to be really careful about the sequence in which I apply my paints. And so, again, like you'll typically work from your darkest colors forward to the highlights. And so to kind of speak to that effect, you can see up here in the awning, some of the lighter colors, the edges are a little bit blurry. So if I want to sharpen some of those up, I have to grab, a different color off of the palette here. Let's see if I can show you. Grab a little bit of white, which you go through by the tankful when you're an oil painter. And I'm just going to mix that into this cooler blue area here. Hopefully you can see that. So I've got kind of a lighter turquoise on there right now. And if I want to sharpen that up, I'll just go ahead and bring it up into the awning here. And you can see right off the bat how that creates a little bit more contrast and pop. And so I don't know that I would necessarily keep that, but I can show just by loading up the paintbrush, like to avoid muddying things up, just give it a good amount of paint, come back in and just start to layer. And again, things are never just white or black in colors. Every color has a little bit of a personality. So anytime I pick up like a lighter color, I try to make sure that it tilts either warm or cool. And same thing even with the dark colors in here. Although some of this might read kind of black through the awning, it's actually like a darker blue or a darker purple. If you could see it in person, especially with the contrast of the warmer colors, you'll pick up some of that personality. So I really enjoy playing around, and sometimes I don't always know exactly where I'm going with a painting, but I have a general sense with the basic shapes and the story that I want to share. So I'm going to take the phone off the easel here just for a moment and give you a little walk around my palette. So let's see if I can do this for you. There we go. So the first color on the palette is white, and then as we move along, I've got the color of sunlight, if you will, kind of a cooler variation of the yellow, warmer, then some oranges and some reds, and then the greens and blues. One of the questions was, how do you avoid muddying things up? One of the things, I don't really use earth colors, so I don't really use like tubes of brown. Sorry about the camera there. I don't really use like tubes of brown or black from a tube. I prefer to work with a lot of primary colors like those reds, blues, and yellows, and then that allows me to keep the color a little bit cleaner. So I enjoy just kind of mixing the darks, mixing the neutral tones, and you see here, actually in this subject, there's some beige, around her, and that's just mixed using a little bit of red oxide and some blue to create that brown. So I don't really work with earth tones from a tube because, in my opinion, that does kind of help create mud faster than what you might like. So I'm going to continue along here. I'm going to set this down so you can kind of see a little bit better. So I'm going to pick up kind of a red and an orange and just pop that into the piece here. And picking up around some of the colors that frame the composition. Again, this was a street scene in Asheville, North Carolina. Asheville is a cool mountain town just maybe about an hour and a half away from where I live in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I'm just going to hint at some areas of shape and color just to kind of break up what was in this window area and add a little bit more interest. There we go. And for those of you who've been watching all along, like, you remember that this was fairly dark and fairly black, and it does allow for the figure to show effectively against it, but not that interesting. So as I come in and make more layers, I'm just trying to add more color and interest around her. And again, if any of you have any questions, please feel free to put into the comments. I'm going to go ahead and move now on to kind of the next phase. So pretending, if you will, that the piece is finished and we're happy with it, what happens next? So let me show you again. This is in my studio here in Knoxville. It's kind of a one-stop shop. I have the upstairs area of a 94-year-old house now. It was lost actually at auction in the Great Depression, and we have the auction poster for it. So pretending that I have something that I'm pleased with, then I bring it over to this area of my studio. And here is a finished piece. I'll try to tilt this up. This is a landscape that I painted from an East Tennessee state park. This is called Study Stream Crossing. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of zoom in so you can see the detail on that. Again, it's all about celebrating the beauty in the everyday. And here in East Tennessee, we're really blessed because we've got beautiful state parks, and so there's never a shortage of inspiration. One question that came in: do you ever have a need for a specific medium or additives for certain effects? I don't generally add much to my paints. I usually just kind of work straight and try to be really careful about the mixing and the sequencing. So in a piece like this, it started out with these darker areas of shadows, and then the last details that I put in were the highlights in the back tree line and then the highlights on the water. So when I have a finished piece like this, the first thing I have to do is varnish it. And varnishing just puts a little bit of luster onto the piece. You can actually see here as I move this through the light how it's got a fairly high luster. But that helps protect the paint from UV radiation over time and fading. And it just kind of brings up the colors. Here's another piece. This is part of my 21st dates. This is a cityscape, and I'll just try to get this to where you can actually, there we go, hopefully see that a little bit better. This is an oil on canvas. This is a cityscape from Lower Manhattan in New York City, and it has not been varnished yet. So it doesn't quite have the same luster as that landscape, but I love the atmosphere in this piece, and eventually when it's fully dry, I will go ahead and varnish it, and so it'll have a little bit more shine and luster to it like the landscape you just saw. Thank you for the comment, Renee Schreiner. I appreciate that. Thank you. So what I do is in this part of my studio, you can see here, this is kind of my tool shop, if you will. So I've got stretcher bars here, like these would eventually become paintings upon which, first I got to put the canvas, and these are the stretcher bars. So I can kind of make, oh, thank you, I appreciate that. Thanks for the comment about the cityscape. The cityscape, just to backtrack for a moment, that's called Lyric, and that's on the cityscape section of my website. So Lyric, and that's part of the 21st Date series that I've been working on. So that's an original oil on canvas. But anyways, to go back, this is my tool shop area. So question, how long do the pieces dry before varnishing? Well, so Knoxville is actually a rainforest. So the high humidity here definitely slows things down. I won't confirm or deny, but I've actually been known to put some of my paintings in south-facing windows to make sure that they dry in time before I go for an art show. The one benefit is that we do have a lot of sunny days here in Tennessee, and so I can kind of speed things along by doing that. But generally they take a few days to dry fully, and so something like this, I actually varnished this landscape several days ago, so it's dry enough now for me to handle. And again, this one is from East Tennessee State Park, about an hour from us, and when I mentioned that we live in a rainforest area, I think you can kind of see what I'm talking about here with the lush greens. Quick question, do you always use a gloss varnish, ever matte? I like the gloss. Give me one split second here and I'll show you. I've done testing with this. This was a panel that I put together, like just kind of showing the colors of the rainbow. And I tried like different varnishes on it. and I just found that I much preferred the look of the gloss. The only kind of downside to that sometimes is like people look at my work, and because I work representationally, they think, oh, that must be like, you know, a photo printed on a matte acrylic or something, and it's not. I just kind of like that luster and sheen of the gloss. So again, this is kind of my shop area here in my studio. So this is where I frame things. I always frame things and do everything kind of myself. I photograph things. So I'm just going to pivot here and show you the next part of my studio. This is where I photograph my work. So I have a separate easel set up, and you can actually see here, turn around, this is one of my studio lights with a filter over it, and he's got a matching colleague over there, so I've got a couple of lights, and ultimately that translates into even lighting. This is a new piece, still kind of wet, fresh off the easel. This is from Knoxville. This is called Daybreak over Sutherland, and I'm just going to show you, it's a street scene, and I really enjoy the rhythm of utility poles and utility lines and stuff like that, as well as just kind of down the street perspective. So this is an early morning view here in Knoxville, just a couple of blocks actually from where I live, and I just really liked the light and the arrangement of the shapes within the subject. I mean, when you're a kid and you say, okay, I want to be an artist, you may not necessarily say, well, I'm going to paint gas stations, but I really enjoy just the configuration of the light and the colors within a subject like this. This is a panoramic piece and fairly recent off the easel. And as I mentioned at the outset, we've been living here in Knoxville, Tennessee for about the past 2.5 years. We were up in rural central Pennsylvania for many years. And so coming down here, all new subjects, all new light. And this is the kind of result of something different, like a whole different input. And again, this is a cityscape called Daybreak over Sutherland. And it's still in the process of drying, so haven't quite finished, you know, with the varnishing and everything else yet, but eventually I think this will be really cool once it gets varnished and into a frame. So moving on, I'm going to share with you some of my little workstation area where I do my framing and canvas preparation. You've seen where I photograph my work, and I also like to keep a fairly extensive library for inspiration. And I'm a child of the 80s, so I also keep a ridiculous amount of music CDs because, as you know, the news is kind of depressing these days, and so I like to listen to music while I work. And what I've done for you today too is I set up kind of like a mini booth area so you can kind of get a virtual impression of what I do. Quick question here. Do you prefer to photograph before varnishing to avoid the reflection? Yeah, definitely, because with the gloss varnish, that kind of just makes things more challenging for photographing. Another question, your palette seems more subtle with your new pieces. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. I've taken this year kind of hard. I miss doing my art shows, I miss seeing people in person, and so maybe that's starting to be reflected in my work, I don't know. But let me show you some of the recent pieces. I set up kind of a mini booth area here in my studio, and I want to start actually with some landscapes. Again, I mentioned that I am doing a series called 21st Dates, and the 21st Dates is all about celebrating my 20th anniversary of my first date with my husband. My husband has been like my biggest supporter, and if you've ever seen us at art shows, he's always there, my constant underpaid artist assistant. So this piece up here at the top, this is called Turn the Light. This is a plein air landscape, and this is from an East Tennessee state park, and it's all about the beautiful blue water and the wonderful play of just early fall foliage and light and contrast. Underneath it now is a more colorful piece. This is called Autumn Blaze, and this is over the Middle Prong River in the Great Smoky Mountains. And of course, it was all about this focal red tree here and the play of just the primary colors, the yellow, reds, and blues. And then on the bottom here, let's see if I can drop, sorry about that, try to get this down a little bit lower here. Another plein air landscape. I may have to take the phone off here, sorry for the shakiness. There we go. This is called Spill and Chill, and this is also a plein air landscape from the Great Smoky Mountains. And really for me this year has been all about getting outside, enjoying the beautiful outdoors, and again, you know, celebrating the beauty that's still around us, like even in kind of a troubled world. So brand new landscapes. This is a larger piece. This is called Collide. And this is also part of the 21st Dates series. I actually caught this while I was out on a bike ride. I'm a painfully slow bicyclist. I do enjoy getting out and taking a ride, but the good thing is that when you're as slow as I am on the bike, you really have a chance to see great subjects. And this was just all about the cloud formation and the red barn. I'm originally from southern Wisconsin, so I'm very partial to subjects like this with kind of the pastoral farm and the low horizon and the beautiful sky. And now closer to home, this is a new piece, and I'll try to back up so you can see it, but this is called Smoky Magic. So this is from the Great Smoky Mountains, and again, the Great Smoky Mountains are a rainforest. They actually meet the criteria for a rainforest, and so you can see here in the piece just really beautiful lush greens and the beautiful play of color and light in the water and just the glow. One thing about living here in Tennessee is that the light is a lot more golden than what I had in Pennsylvania, so there's a lot more warmth to it that I really enjoy. And then moving along, I have a piece from Chicago. There's inspiration everywhere. So this, of course, is from the Loop in Chicago, Illinois. I just like kind of the rugged structure. Question, where in Wisconsin? I'm watching from Wisconsin. I grew up in Dane County, so I grew up in southern Wisconsin, just outside of Madison. So I'm originally from DeForest. I'm a DeForest Norski, and I went to school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, so I'm also a Badger. And in fact, I can show you here around the corner. I think you can see. I've got my, maybe, I don't know if I can show you. Sorry. There it is. There's my Badger. So, once a Badger, always a Badger. But anyways, I've got subjects from Chicago. My husband's actually from Chicago. And then part of moving south is I've got some new cities. I tend to feature New York City and Chicago quite a bit in my work, but this bigger piece is called Who I Wanted Her to Be, and this is from Cincinnati, Ohio. So Cincinnati is just 4 hours away from us here in eastern Tennessee. And then bigger piece. I tried to pull out some bigger pieces to share with you today so you could kind of see a little bit more what I do, the detail. This is called Diamond Cut. This is from the Diamond District in New York City. And then all the way into here in Knoxville. This top piece is a piece I did earlier this summer. This is right here in downtown Knoxville. And again, it's a celebration of the golden light and colors here in Knoxville. It's a different kind of light from what I had in Pennsylvania. And so I'm very interested in the warmth and just, again, that rhythm of the utility lines. And so I showed you earlier the piece I did recently, and this has some of the same repetition of the utility lines and just that pattern and rhythm that I really enjoy. Here, this piece is a little bit different. I enjoy solitary figurative subjects. So this is from a parking garage in Midtown Manhattan, and it's called Waiting for You. And it's kind of a comment on our socially distanced times, if you will. Like we're all having to kind of wait to get back together with friends and family who may be at a distance. And so I just kind of thought that this was an interesting story. You know, here's somebody who's waiting outside the parking garage waiting for you. And then lastly, I do really enjoy just really vibrant pops of color. And so, of course, this is the iconic Times Square in New York City. You know, quiet right now, and hopefully we'll come back within a year or two after we get through the current health crisis. But this is called phosphorescence, and it kind of showcases my interest in the primary colors. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my palette and my easel. Does anybody have any questions for me at this point? I'm happy to answer anything. Again, it's really about showcasing what's beautiful in our world between the landscapes and the cityscapes. So I really enjoy just taking what's out there and showcasing it. I think there's a lot there, even in a troubled world, that we can enjoy. So I'm going to get my phone, try to get my phone back on the little stand here so I can talk to you more effectively. There we go. And again, this piece, for those of you who just joined, this one is from Asheville, North Carolina. So this is a reflection of, you know, I wouldn't normally have come this far south in inspiration. I've usually in the past kind of specialized more in northeastern cities, but I really enjoy now the different light and different places and subjects that I have access to. All right, so any questions? Because I want to be sure that if you have any questions, I can answer things. And again, all the pieces that I showed to you today are available on my website. So if you just go to sarahpollock.com, it's Sarah with an H, Pollock, Pollock. And I'm happy to answer questions. You can also contact me through the website. And I want to mention a couple of things. The 21st Dates series runs now through November 7th. And for anybody who's a member of my mailing list, you'll get an early preview. So you would actually get kind of a sneak peek of a piece when it's finished before it goes out to the public, as well as a discount. So by all means, join my mailing list for that information. Quick question. What's the difference in varnishing with regular gloss varnish and Gamvar gloss? I actually use Gamvar gloss, and so I don't know for other brands what the difference would be. What I would recommend is just do a test. You saw that test panel that I showed you earlier where I put out the colors of the rainbow. Just take the paints that you're using, because the varnishes will interact differently with different kinds of paint. I can actually show you, that brings to mind, I'll show you what I use for paints. This is the drawer where I keep all my paints. And I've got all sorts of different brands. I've got Winsor & Newton, got Michael Harding. Gamblin is kind of my workhorse, and so I use a lot of Gamblin colors. And what I found is that when I use some of their products, like whether it's varnishes or other mediums, they definitely kind of behave differently with other manufacturers' paint. And so just test it before you commit to anything. Make sure you always test stuff. That's probably the best way. One more question. Thank you, Gabriella. I love how much color pops. Where did you learn? So I got my degree in art from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and then I went to school specializing in art. I started out as a music major, but ear training chewed me up and spat me out. So I switched to art, and then I went to Walt Disney Feature Animation. I worked on color in their animated films, and that's really where I kind of have that interest in pure color. I think I just sort of have that aesthetic from animation. So yeah, that's where I learned. I got great training there. Like, even though Walt Disney does everything on the computer now, like especially since acquiring Pixar, in order to keep the job, you had to pass a series of painting tests. And so the traditional painting skills were really important for them. So any other questions before we wrap up today? I really appreciate you taking the time to join me. And again, I encourage you to please visit my website. It's sarahpollock.com, Sarah with an H, and Pollock, Pollock.com. You can reach out to me that way through the website and check out the pieces that I shared with you today. So without any further ado, that kind of wraps up my presentation for today. But thank you so much. I appreciate your interest. And by all means, if you think of something afterwards, just reach out on the website. Thank you from East Tennessee and Knoxville. Thank you, and have a good evening.